But the other thing that's affecting the way that we raise our children is government, social media. And almost social media and an iPad are raising that child. They're transforming their brain.
What was amazing to me was when the homeless kiddo in kindergarten came to school with his new cell phone.
If you create an environment where the truth is no longer the truth, you can impose any travesty amongst the population.
It's amazing to me, Mom and Dad, how we let our daughters leave the house dressed in a way that says, I'm open for business. Oh, they look cool. Oh, they look wonderful. Oh, no, this is not the Real Housewives, and those women are crazy anyway. This is something where we're protecting our children.
And I know many parents are making the same decision that I made, which is to homeschool their children. I no longer believe that an institutional setting should have the responsibility to educate my children. Welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast, where we're changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. And Jonathan, do we have a treat today? And our audience is always really used to having guest entrepreneurs, business professionals that are day-to-day trying to transform industries. They're trying to transform healthcare. They're trying to transform financial issues. And all along, after 31 episodes, and we've had so much success in 31 episodes, we haven't had a focus on kids. We haven't had a focus on kids, the future of our journey, the future of our world. And I'll tell you, I have 3 kids. I have 3 kids myself, 18, 13, and 10. And one of them is going to college. The other one is finishing up middle school. And the other one's going to 5th grade. And I will tell you, my legacy are my children. That is my number one priority, my children. And today with me, I have DJ Stutz, and I'm going to have DJ present and introduce herself. And she is a parenting coach, an author, a speaker, a podcast host. But I think what she does is more important than who she is. Because as an early childhood specialist, she's really framing the future of our society. And I think it's so important. Before I introduce DJ, I really want to just mention a few things. And DJ, I'm going to make a few comments, and I want you to really elaborate as you introduce yourself. Just so the audience understands, the title of today's podcast is Unified Care, Bridging Gaps Across Professions. Unified Care, Bridging Gaps Across Professions. I love that. So when it comes to parenting, DJ, there is no manual. There is no playbook, right? We don't know how to raise children. There is something called a maternal-paternal instinct that some of us tend to be a little bit more in tune with. Some of us are completely tone deaf on, if I can use that word. And we are falling into a world where socioeconomic status, the ability for us to keep up with the Joneses, and just the societal demands and influences, and sometimes the pressures, are affecting the way we parent our children. But the other thing that's affecting the way that we raise our children is government, social media. We live in a world where we have outsourced the raising of our children to the government and social media. And I think that is so dangerous. So dangerous. You're putting an iPad in front of a child, when they're 6 months old. And almost social media and an iPad are raising that child. They're transforming their brain, their behavior, their development. And then we ask ourselves why we have the children that we have. And then nutrition is something else that is so key in a child. And the last thing I'll say is the biggest threat, if not like the things I mentioned are not threats, but the other threat, DJ, that I want you to comment on is the biggest thief of joy, which is comparison. And parents are always comparing their children to other people's children. They're always comparing, why isn't my child like this? Why isn't my child like this? Almost forgetting that every human being is unique. And every human being, if you've seen one, you've seen one. And I think that individuality that we're supposed to celebrate is actually becoming our nemesis, right? So I know I just said a mouthful, but again, it shows you how passionate and I will tell you obsessed I am about this topic, which is how do we become better parents? Because I believe that there is a direct, transferable skill set to being a good leader if you're a good parent. So, DJ, without further ado, please introduce yourself to my audience. Welcome to the Bedrock Way podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Andre, I think that you are right on with so many things. Before I get started, I'll just let you know that I have 20 years of experience teaching kindergarten and directing preschools for the school district. So I'm a retired public school teacher who believes that public school education, private school education, no matter what it is, that is simply a support to parents, not the other way around. Parents are the ones in charge of your child's education. You are the one who is in charge of making sure your child is getting the information that they need to manage in the world. And so the schools are a support to that effort and responsibility, not the other way around. So I'll have a fun conversation there. But anyway, I have been a uh, parenting facilitator for the Division of Family and Youth Services for 16 years when I was living in Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is. And I actually taught parenting classes in two women's prisons. I taught
Wow.
parenting, yeah. There was a court ordered group of men who are coming out of prison and getting ready to go back into, you know, normal life, if there's such a thing. And I taught parenting to those groups as well as homeless shelters and PTAs and churches and libraries and community centers and all of those things. And so I was doing that um, usually in the evenings or during the summer while I was teaching as well. Oftentimes teachers have two jobs, and that's kind of was my other job. But I have 5 kids of my own, 12 grandchildren. I am the oldest of 7. I have seven
Wow.
D I have 7D nieces and nephews. And I know. And so my husband's the baby of 9. So we're spread out. And so kids have been my whole life. I was a big sister of 14 months. And my youngest brother was born the 2 weeks before I turned 17. And so this has just been my whole life. And I realized too that when I was raising, so we had 4 kids that I birthed, and they grew up. My youngest graduated from high school, was a year out of high school, and we thought, oh, we're not done being pummeled by children. Let's adopt a 12-year-old out of foster care.
Wow.
And so we did that. And in fact, it's her son, my grandson, that's visiting with us right now. So hopefully he'll be quiet and we'll be able to get things done. But um, as I was raising these 4 little kids, and I thought I knew so much, and I realized that, man, I had one that had some neurodiversity, and who is now a police officer, but I just knew I needed more. I needed to know more. What I had wasn't enough. So I went back into college, and that's when I started working toward my teaching degree. But my first class I ever took was a child development class, child psychology class. And I can remember coming home. I was taking classes at night so my husband could work and I was home with the kids. I woke him up. It's like 10:30 at night. And I'm like, guess what? They're normal. Like all this behavior they're doing is normal. Because I think parents, so often I get that question with my coaching. Is this normal? Is my child okay? And so we talk about it, we go through it, and the reality is, yeah, your kid's probably fine. And we just need to see where they are and figure out what the next step is to help them along the path or down the track toward adulthood.
I will tell you the thing that frustrates me the most is that in a world where humans are known to not be perfect, parents are always looking to have their children be perfect. And abnormalities, whether physical, developmental, personality, intellectual, you and again, as someone who has three children, you someone who you have an army, so I can, you're probably this applies even more. But we don't want abnormalities, right? When it comes to our children, we want better for our kids than we want for ourselves. So I have so many questions for you, and I'm going to take it one by one. So I think the first thing that I wanted to tackle with you is, and I know I mentioned it earlier, and that's really the advent of social media. I'm just going to frame the question as follows. When we were in school, right? I graduated high school in 1996, and I went to middle school in the late 80s, 88 to 1992. No phones, no email, no internet. Innocence was very, very much at its highest. And my goodness, I love my youth. I had a great youth. And unfortunately, bullying was normal, right? I don't think we called it bullying back then. I think we called it, hey, somebody just teasing you, and you would, either hash it out or, hug it out, and things would move on,
Or
right?
fight it out.
Or fight it out in many instances, absolutely. Unfortunately, with the advent of social media, bullying has become a 24/7, almost continued barrage where kids leave school and then have to be susceptible, right, to being teased on social media. And again, we're seeing, unfortunately, self harm, suicide, mental health deteriorating, and the pandemic isolation didn't do us any favors. So I want you, as an expert of so many years, to really, because this is an inquiry, but also a call to action to our listeners who are working their butts off out there trying to be entrepreneurs, trying to support their family members, and potentially outsourcing the raising of their kids, for them to also be aware that I can't think of a more adversarial thing for our kids right now than social media. And as parents, we need to manage it appropriately. And I will tell you personally, DJ, my kids are not allowed on social media. They're just not. Social media is extremely, extremely, with the algorithms and the AI, it learns you, right? It learns how to manipulate you without you even know you're being manipulated. So let's talk about that, because I really want to focus, and especially for you, you've been doing it for so many years. How has social media really changed your practice?
Hugely. And in fact, as a teacher, it changed everything. So I mostly for 20 years taught kindergarten. I had 4 years where I was directing three preschools for the school district, and that was in the greater Denver metro area. And all but the last 2 years of my teaching was in the lowest poverty level schools, high crime, high gang activity, all of that. And in fact, every year I had at least half of my class had an incarcerated family. And then there was a homeless shelter that was within our school boundaries. And so every year I had two or three homeless kids that would be in my classroom. What was amazing to me was when the homeless kiddo in kindergarten came to school with his new cell phone. And I
Wow.
was like, Dad, come, we gotta talk. And sweet parents, such good, tender, kind, just struggling with life. And I came to love them so dearly. But when I asked them, like, are you out of your mind? Because I talked to them, yeah. And I said, and they said, we got it for free because of our income level. They provided a cell phone for every member of their family, including their 5-year-old son.
Wow.
Their 3-year-old didn't qualify. But once they turned 5, he got this cell phone. And I'm like, well, he's not going to be able to use it in our classroom. They're like, but he was so
DJ,
excited to show
why is that? I mean, that is just so bizarre to me that there is a qualification for a 5-year-old. Like, who comes up with these benchmarks that a 5-year-old has the intellectual capacity to possess a phone? Like, who comes up with these rules?
Well, hmm, I have an idea. This is my plan, or what I think and what I see is happening is I know that when we teach our children values and morals and we give them boundaries from a very early age, they are used to that. They will conform to that better. Not 100% because they're not supposed to, but they will have a better, stronger relationship as they get older. Conversely, if we are introducing them at a very young age to these ideas of social norms, quote unquote, of, all of these lessons and ideas that they want to instill in our kids at a very young age, if they can do it at that young age, they are going to be more effective. And so if we give them those phones, if we get them on screens at that very young age, they will be more effectively, and in my mind, detrimentally um, engaged in these ideas. They can control what we think. They can control what our 5-year-olds think. It was so easy you listen to a 5-year-old coming to kindergarten with their political view, right? Which is so hysterical. It's so much fun listening to them. But it's not their view. They haven't done the research. They haven't listened to both sides and come up with an idea. Where did they get that view? From their families, from the neighborhoods that they live in, whatever it is. And so it's the same thing with getting this technology into the hands of our kids at that very young age. So here I was in a school that was older than me, which is pretty significant, that had that had the carpet in my classroom was my facilities manager told me he knew it was at least 40 years old. The carpet in my classroom was at least 40 years old. But every one of my students in kindergarten was required to have an iPad that I had to keep charged, that I had to keep everything up. I only had electricity on 2 walls in my classroom to manage all of that. We did have problems with kids, thank heavens, not in my classroom, but it could have been. I mean, kids are kids, but there were 3 kindergartens in my school, and one of the others of doing inappropriate things, taking inappropriate pictures with these school iPads. We're getting them into all of this so young that they are not learning a lot about, why do I have to learn this? Because I can just look it up. I can just ask Siri.
Why are we putting an iPad and an electronic device so early in the hands of a 5-year-old? And you are 1,000% correct. The earlier that we can frame the mindsets of our youth, the easier it will be to manipulate them later on. And you're right. There are a lot of these social norms, and I'll put them in quotation marks, that are being imposed in our kids. And they're being imposed in our kids as norms, and they're not norms, right? They're I always say to people, it's like if you create an environment where the truth is no longer the truth, you can impose any travesty amongst a population. It's pretty crazy.
Absolutely.
I believe that the phone is considered to be one of the most technologically advanced pieces of devices of our history, and I believe that, right? Because it's a phone, internet, iPod, it does everything. Yeah. However, one can also very accurately, DJ, say that the phone is a multi-trillion-dollar weapon of mass destruction because it's destroying our youth. So I want to make sure that our audience understands, just like when you're under attack by any weapon of mass destruction, you can't be on the defensive. You got to be on the offensive. And quite frankly, what the phone and the iPad are doing, they're helping to improve the programming of our children, right?
That's exactly what they're doing.
What the television can't do anymore, the phone, because you can turn off the television, right? But these iPads and these convenient handheld devices are just improving and perpetuating that programming. So what can we do as parents to use our time appropriately rather than use iPads as babysitters? But what can we do to make sure that we counter this weapon of mass destruction and make sure that we're continuing to guide our children appropriately so when they get to be older, they can guide their generation?
Yeah. Well, and the answer is honestly, it's not rocket science as opposed to the phones that we put into their hands. But it's, do you got a bike? Do you got a basketball hoop outside? Are you growing a garden? I can't remember if I've mentioned. So we have our 6-year-old grandson staying with us for a little bit, and we've got 2 acres now. We just moved here a year ago, and we've got a garden. And this morning he was out and getting strawberries and helping me with weeding. And we went down. I'm fortunate enough now that I retired. We moved into a very rural area. We've got a canal just down the street, and he's down just literally throwing rocks in the water from the bridge and so entertained. I think that really that's the answer. And this is what helps us build relationships and trust and thinking. We want our kids to know that we do have answers. We can fix things when, the kids call my husband Poppy. So when Poppy is out there and he can work on the car and fix the car, and he can say, hey, buddy, hand me this wrench or that wrench or whatever. A 3-year-old is able to differentiate between different types of wrenches even at that age, and they
Love that.
love being with you and working with you. It's great. Go on hikes, go on those evening walks, go and look at the sunset. That, and where I live now, the sun doesn't go down till 10 o'clock at night. And so we're watching that sun go down in the evening as he's in bed, and we're reading stories and saying prayers and doing the things that we do to connect. But we put that away. Now, do we put that technology away completely? The reality tells us probably we would not, because if we don't give them a chance to understand how it works and for them to manipulate it, it will manipulate them. And so, how do we find that balance? We set a timer. We have certain times he can be on his little tablet, like when I'm recording a podcast. But at the same time, we've got rules that no screens at the table when we're eating. There are absolutely no, because we're having a conversation. We're talking. We're doing things. We're engaging. It's great to have, times when they want to dress up and be like mom and dad, or to go to the store and give them a list of 3 things. You go find these things and I'll find these things. And even at 5, 6 years old, they are old enough to be able to do that. And now they feel confident, they feel strong, they feel independent, that I can do things. And this is going to give them the courage to stand up for themselves when they need to say, this is not my dad, if someone's trying to snag them, which really, honestly, people, we got to calm down about that. That's not happening. They are in more danger around people, family, than they are from strangers. So let's calm down a little bit. Let's let them ride the bike around the block without us following them in the car or chasing them. Now, if we want to get on the bike and ride with them somewhere, that's fine, but give them a chance to do things independently as well. And they're going to learn and grow.
Everything you're saying, I love. And I took some notes here because it's ironic. Everything that sometimes becomes a polarizing topic, there's irony in it. So in a time that we are so connected and plugged into technology, we are so disconnected from nature. You're right. You know, exercising, the sun, being around water, nature, it costs us nothing. Nothing. And it allows us to connect with nature, and it allows us to connect with each other in a time where we are so unbelievably disconnected. So I love that advice. And continuing the connection aspect of it. So I will tell you what I did this past year personally, and I want to get your advice and your take on it. I no longer, and again, as a former teacher, I want you to give me your suggestion on this. I no longer, I just made the decision, DJ, a month ago. And I know many parents are making the same decision that I made, which is to homeschool their children. I no longer believe that an institutional setting should have the responsibility to educate my children. And I really think that education is the way that we educate our children in the modern world, I think is just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me that every year our kids leave our home at 7 o'clock in the morning. We don't get them back till 3 o'clock. Then they go to activities. Then they stuff something down their throat at 8:30 at night. Then we do showers, bedtime. And there are weeks, and I'm not proud to say this, DJ, there are weeks where I see my children maybe 30 minutes to an hour total.
Yeah.
And we had a couple of experiences this year with my middle child at school. And the way that the school leadership handled these issues was so disappointing to me that I said to my wife, it is time for us to take the responsibility of educating our children into our own hands. And we have pulled the kids out of school. They will be homeschooled for the foreseeable future. And at the same time, I said to myself, at a time where our kids are so under attack, to your point, they're trying to be sensationalized and programmed at 5 years old. I want to make sure that when my kids are older, they learn stuff from me.
Yeah.
They learn the difference between right and wrong from me. There were no social norms. There was no untruths or your truth is not my truth. There was just truths.
Just truth.
And we have taken the responsibility. The other thing is I refuse, to have my children reach college age and almost be like, all right, it's over. Which essentially happened with our son, right? He's 18, he's off to college,
Yep.
We're done. And I don't want that to happen with my girls. Like I told my wife, we're going to travel, we're going to spend time together. Homeschool, it's about 2-3 hours a day. And those people are going into Ivy League schools. But yet our kids are at institutions for 8 hours. And mind you, the educators are burnt out. The educators are tired. The educators don't feel supported. The educators, to your point, are underpaid. They're overworked, underpaid, and disrespected. So to me, the school system no longer supports the basis of, for us, or a lot of my friends and people who think like me, to do that. So what is your take on that as a former educator, about the real rise in homeschooling? And obviously the regime, right, is not too happy with this because now they're going to have what we call rebels to deal with, right? Independent thinkers, critical thinkers, exactly, that are not going to be manipulated. So what are your feelings on that? Because I do think that is a very important lesson, advice that we can give to our listeners, that sometimes we tend to think that, oh my God, homeschool's so scary, I can never do it. When during the pandemic, we learned that we could do it, and we did it. And we're looking forward to doing it again. And you know what? Our kids deserve the best opportunity to be taught by the people who care about them the most, and that's the parents.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, honestly, let's be real. Some of the biggest hurdles to people being able to do homeschooling is their own work schedule. And so, if you have a time when you have to have the two incomes, what else am I going to do with my kid? Right? And so that's really hard. But if you can work that out and reassess wants versus needs, right? And really look at what's important and what's not. And I'm not saying if you're not homeschooling your kids, you're being a bad parent. I'm not saying that in any way, but I do have a lot of respect for people who homeschool. This coming from a retired public school teacher. So, what I think though too is that recognize maybe science isn't your big thing. I'm a really good reading teacher. I can teach up my kids to read and they'll do great. But then what are the areas then that I'm lacking in that I might need some support in helping making sure that my kids get what they need in all of the key areas of education. And there are so many programs that are out there, and there are groups where you can get together with other homeschoolers, and maybe there is someone who is really good at math, and then there's another parent who's really good at reading, and another parent who's really good at making science interesting and making history come alive, and all of those things, and team up, make it a team thing, and work together to fill in those gaps, because once again, nobody's perfect. And so we're working to fill those gaps and make sure that our kids are getting everything that they need. And that's going to be great. I have a sister-in-law, again, oldest of seven, and her son, her youngest, her son, was really struggling in school, in elementary school, and all their kids went to a very high academic private high school, but that was only a high school available. So she was watching what her teachers were doing. She was volunteering in the classroom, and she thought, I can do this. Now they had funds. My brother does well. They were able to travel and go to historical sites and to go to scientific seminars and opportunities and do those kinds of things. And she wound up homeschooling him, and then he was ready, and actually far better ready than his siblings were, to go into that high academic high school situation, because he'd been home taught, and they weren't wasting a lot of time. I had one parent that I'm coaching, and she said, how they just spent, 2 weeks on teaching their kids about pride, Pride Month coming up, right? And I really love Morgan Freeman's one of my favorite people. I just love listening to him and his philosophies. And when they were talking about what is it, Black Awareness Month, Black History Month. And he said he hates it. I hate it. Because why are you relegating my contributions to 1 month? The contributions of people as a whole span the gambit. And so to relegate things. And so when we're doing things like that are pulling us apart, that are making an adversarial situation from the very earliest beginnings, we don't want that, and yet we're spending so much time on that in the public school system. And the funny thing is, they would have all of these things going on, and I'm like, we're just learning here. I'm not doing that." And my kids always, every year, my kids had the highest scores out of all of the kindergarten classes. My kids had the best scores academically than the others. We just didn't spend all that extra time on stuff that didn't matter, but we did spend time on how to join in play, how to manage conflict when we're not getting along. If you see someone being bullied, we practiced it. If you see someone being bullied, how to go in and get the target out of that situation and not even address the bully. You don't have to get up and get in their face and say, "Hey, you can't do that," or whatever. You say, "Hey, come on, come play with me. You don't need to be here. Come over with us." And you pull them away. And so we practice some of those things, but then we just spend a lot of time in math, reading, writing, science, history, civics, all of those things. That's what we need to be doing, and not this other stuff that's going on.
We sit here today recording this episode on Juneteenth, right? Which is now a federal holiday. And
Right.
while, listen, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the basis of today, it it doesn't need to be a polarizing topic. I'll tell you a perfect example. I went to the bank this morning. The bank is closed. I had no idea why the bank was closed. I really didn't. So I asked I went to the gym and I asked a friend and I said, "Hey, listen, the bank is closed. Do you have any idea? It's Juneteenth. You didn't know that? You're not being sensitive?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Oh, you know." And I'm like, first of all, I didn't know it was Juneteenth. Um, didn't really pay mind to it. And what does that have to do with anything else? But it's become a programmed, sensationalized topic to now become, as you said, adversarial. It's to me, it's just a joke. And to go back on what should be taught, you're right. We spend an entire month about what your sexual orientation is, as opposed to teaching people about values and morals. I'll tell you what we should spend a month on. Right? You want me to tell you what we should spend a month on? How to teach our kids about taxes. We should spend a month on that.
Yes.
Maybe spend a month on teaching people how to invest their money. Maybe spend a month on teaching people how to own a business and being able to run a business. Maybe we should teach people about the executive, judicial branch of government and how laws are executed and how laws are made. Like, we are so ignorant to how the world works, but yet we're spending time, to your point, on things that unfortunately are not significant. I did. This is another thing that caused me to go to the homeschool aspect of it. Was we were doing algebra something, and my daughter was so frustrated, and I can't even tell you what we were working on because it's something that she'll never use in her entire life. But I said to her, I think what the lesson behind this math problem is not the math problem itself, but your need, and I'm going to go into the next subject, the need for adversity in our kids. And that's one thing, DJ, that I see lacking more and more and more. My children's biggest source of adversity is probably what pair of Jordans they're going to wear that morning. Probably
Yeah.
what outfit they're going to wear. Thankfully, they were going to Christian school. And again, I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm trying to make a point that because we live in such a great country that gives us so much ability to be successful and have comfortable lives, that we've almost forgotten how to instill adversity in our children. Myself, and I grew up very, very humble, right? I wasn't the wealthiest person. I wasn't a poor person. I never lacked for anything. My goodness, I had a lot of love. But one thing I had was I had some tough times. My parents divorced. Actually, they separated when I was really young. They divorced when I was about 12. We moved from house to house, to state. Seventh grade, I did it in 5 states and 4 schools. And all that adversity made me into the person who I am today. And I wouldn't be the president of a company if I wouldn't have gone through those things. But I'm seeing
Yeah.
a struggle that I see for ourselves and for most parents is, especially as we try to keep up with the Joneses, right, and undo our wrongs, so to speak, is that we are not instilling in our kids adversity, and we're teaching our kids to be, when they're challenged, to run, when they're challenged, to be beaten. And I always say, when it's easy to beat you, it's easy to divide you. And you've heard the adage, right? Strong men create good times, but weak men create bad times. And I think we're experiencing a time in the world where weak men have created or will create hard times. So what is your suggestion on that adversity aspect that we probably are lacking in society right now?
In fact, it's so funny that you bring this up. I had an amazing principal those last 2 years that I taught. My school, my original school shut down. And so I had to move to another, and that's where I wound up, was in, normal America. But I had this amazing principal. So often I was taking in kids from other classrooms that the teacher, I just can't handle him. Or she's just out of control and I can't manage them. Okay, send them to me. And they'd come, and sometimes they'd just spend a day. Other times they were completely transferred into my classroom. Never had a problem with these kids. Now, part of that might be because I was dealing for most of my teaching career with, I would have kids who would stab another child with
Oh,
a
wow.
pencil because they didn't get the marker fast enough that they wanted, or, that I just had major, 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 you know, violent issues with a lot of the kids that came into my class. So someone comes in and they're not sitting still. It's like, are you kidding me? That's not even a problem. Like, they just need to wiggle. It's okay. They'll probably learn better when they wiggle. So, but as I talked to my principal and I said, there are kids who are these stellar A, easy, easy, easy kids, right? Never give you a problem. And then there are kids that truly do have some major, huge issues, such as, I will stab you if I get mad at you with a pencil. And then there's everything in between. And so many of the new teachers that were coming in didn't have the ability, if their child was like just a little bit, oh, they're not perfect, but they challenge you in that one. Oh, I can't handle, they're
Yep.
just terrible. They're awful kids. No, no, because they had never been taught to deal with adversity. They'd never taught how to, because they had these helicopter parents who swooped in and fixed every problem, or lawnmower parents who just mow everything out of the way so their child doesn't even see a problem. And so what they turn into is adults who are struggling with how to manage problems at work, problems with coworkers, problems with a spouse, problems with raising kids. It's hard, right? And it is hard, and it's rewarding and amazing, but it's hard. And so it's okay that it's hard, but they aren't being taught that, and they don't have the skills for that. And so it's okay to, your kids are fighting and arguing. Step back a little bit. Let's see where this goes. Mom, he's doing this. Oh, well, I'm excited to see how you guys work that out,
I love
right?
that. I love that. I love that, DJ, because again, oh my God, you're talking to me because when the kids have conflict in the house, we're so quick to diffuse, and you're right. Almost one thinks to be perfect and copacetic, but adults don't operate that way. The world doesn't operate that way. And the other thing I think we find ourselves doing is that when the kids get upset or the kids wake up, not in the mood, or we tell them that they have to be in a good mood, that they have to. What is your problem? When sometimes we have days we're not bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, right? But no one's telling us down our backs, you got to brighten up and you got to, And I think we do it to our kids, which, again, to me, it's that adversity or that lack of normality, right? If your kid is not normal, then they need counseling. They need help, which leads me to the third option that people always say, and it's medications, right? You have to take Ritalin. You have to take this. You have to take that. My goodness, if I have a parent call me asking me if their kids should take medication, I'll jump out of the window because my answer every single time is no. There's so many things that you haven't exhausted, but you don't go to a butcher and ask him to make you sushi, right? If you go to a psychiatrist or a physician who prescribes medication for behavioral issues, the likelihood of you getting a medication is very high. So, what is your take on this? Because I'm sure this is something that you deal with like incredibly. And I'm not going to say that there are some issues and some instances where medication is appropriate. But I would like to think that in a developing human body and a developing human brain, without any potential issues, right, that have been identified, the behavioral issues need to be dealt with behavioral modifications, not pharmacological agents that are just going to permanently make things worse. What are your thoughts on that?
My attitude has evolved through the years on that. So our youngest son, I have two boys, three girls, and our youngest son, oh, right? But five brothers, whatever. I'm thinking he is just a high energy boy, right? He finally gets into 6th grade. Things are blowing up at school. I'm the PTA president at the school. We go in to talk to the assistant principal about an issue with a teacher, blah, 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 issues handled. And then he's like, Christian, go sit outside for a minute. I want to talk to your mom. Okay. So he sits down with me. He says, your son's like severely ADHD. And I'm like, whatever. He's just a busy boy. I'm doing this. He goes, no, I'm telling you because I didn't care what this teacher said. She's an idiot. He didn't like her. And so, but he said, so while I was sitting here and I was doing some of these tests, he says, I know because I'm ADHD and this is what I went through. And I said, well, I'm not taking him to some school thing to test him out because I don't trust you guys. And he started laughing. He goes, I don't trust us either. But so we found a PD. I know I've had some really good experiences with some of the people that I've been able to work and do things with. But so we found a pediatric neurologist, had a really, really good reputation, had treated many, many kids. So we took him there and he said that Christian definitely, like, he says, I won't say never. He says, I super, super rarely will medicate after the first visit. We're medicating Christian. I'm like, wow, well, okay. So we started going through all of that. So he's in 6th grade. A lot of stories to go along with that. But in the end, when he's a senior in high school, he came to me and he said, Mom, I don't want to take the medicine anymore. I don't like the way it makes me feel. I'm like, well, you're a senior in high school. You are about to be an adult. So these decisions are yours to make. However, you are responsible for your behavior. Whether you're medicated or not medicated, you cannot use that as an excuse. So if you choose not to medicate, you are still responsible for your grades, your actions, whatever, is going on. And both my boys are super high energy kids, adrenaline junkies, and, all boy. And, but he said, okay, all right. And he wound up doing some kind of self-medication with things like Dr. Pepper, Mountain Dew, high caffeine drinks, and that seemed to help him rather than being on the medication. So I'm okay, all right, we can do that. And he wound up with a scholarship. We had to have that conversation that you are still responsible for your choices, for your behavior. And so I know that, and now knowing what I know about um, ADHD and all of that, I would have handled his early years much differently than the way I did because I have more information now. I think that is the key, is getting educated and finding out what are the options. What can I do as a mom, as a dad? There's nutrition, there's physical activity, there are mental skills that you can give them and work with them on. And maybe medication is part of that. I'm never going to put a parent down for that choice, but make an educated decision. So when we got our youngest daughter that we adopted our youngest daughter when she was 12 years old. She had been in foster care. We'd been foster parents. She had been on Ritalin nonstop from the time she was 4 years old until we got her. No break in the summer, no break on spring break, anything. And now I'd seen Christian, so I felt like I knew what ADHD was like. She was not it. And so I went, you have no idea what I went through to get her off of that, because you have to foster for 6 months before you can adopt. And so it was a big deal, but I did it and we worked it out and we got her off. Everyone was mad at us for it, but we didn't see that big of a difference. Ooh, that was a big slamming door. But there was there wasn't that big of a difference of her being on or off. She still had, grades. She still had some big behavior issues, but that was experiential. She'd been through hell growing up. I just can't even start with what she'd been through. So that's what those behaviors were based on, not on a chemical imbalance in her head. So my idea is, if you're thinking about that, I would get a second opinion. I would look at other strategies that are out there and then make the decision that's right for you and your child and your family, and recognize that those decisions may change as they grow, as they go through puberty, as they have other life experiences. You may need to revisit that once a year, after 6 months. It just depends on what's going on within.
I love that because I think that there's an evolution to who we are, right? Physiologically, mentally, environmental. There's an evolution, right? And somebody said to me the other day, and I had the best answer, and you'll appreciate this. The gentleman had a 19-year-old and a 7-year-old, and the 19-year-old was this, studious, very nice kid, and the 7-year-old was, off the chain, to put it lightly, and he said, I don't understand. We raised them in the same house. Da, da, da. And I said to him, his name is John. I said, John, you were different when you raised Tyler, the 19-year-old, than you are now raising Liam, the 7-year-old. We often tend to think that we are raising our kids, but our kids are watching us grow up too. And I think that is the coolest part about parenting. And when I talk to parents, and I'm sure when you talk to parents, I think parents also have to understand that you are also learning along the way of teaching. And that is sometimes very intimidating, right? Because when you're teaching and learning, sometimes there's an imposter syndrome that gets in your head that tells you you need to have all the answers. And I think you just kind of highlighted that, DJ, perfectly. That there has to be an open mind along that journey, because I think one of the most difficult journeys that we all will take when we take the privilege of being a parent, right? When we take that privilege on, is that the path is not certain, the path is unpaved, but the path has to be driven, walked on, whatever, with an open mind, and understanding the twists and turns and exits and U-turns and K-turns are gonna happen. But as long as you maintain an open mind and spend time with your kids and just devote, to your point, that ability to understand that they too will falter. And I will tell you, a lot of things that I see in kids, people think that as parents, kids do what we tell them. Kids become who we are. They duplicate the example that we give them, right? And I think a lot of parents are great. They're great at telling people what they need to do rather than doing it themselves, so they can learn from the example, and you don't even have to say it. I also I would be remiss, I think, also in this topic of medication and the evolution, and I praise you for getting your daughter or niece, was that?
Daughter.
Daughter off her medications, because here's something else that happens when kids grow up, DJ. There's something called hormones. Right? Puberty. That also changes a woman's body. It changes a man's body. And to think that the same, hormonal interaction in our endocrine system is the same at 5 or 6 or 14 and 15 is lunacy. It's lunacy. It counters common sense. So I'm going to give you rapid fire here on a few questions. And I want you to tell me, just answer the question. So you raised a lot of kids, you fostered a lot of kids, you have a lot of grandbabies, and I'm sure you have advised a lot of parents on their kids. So what is your favorite gender to raise? Boy or girl, and why?
Oh, I know I should say both, but it's boys.
Why?
Well, I think a lot of it is I grew up with 5 brothers, and so I understand that mentality a little better. And I think that there's so much wonderful but exasperating drama with girls that you don't always have with boys. I grew up in a home where my mom, for her birthday, got season tickets to UCLA football. And for her anniversary every year, she
Yeah.
got season tickets to UCLA basketball. I grew up watching Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton and the John Wooden years. And if my dad ever changed that, he would have been in trouble. So
I
she
love
loved
that.
it.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So I
All
think
right.
for that,
I love it. Second question. As parents, we struggle with the following two things. We struggle with having money but not time, or having time but not money. What is more important or most important to raise a child if you need to pick one, and why?
oh, time. Time is more important than money. And I think we make parenting so much harder than it needs to be. We think that we have to have them in every sport and it has to be a traveling team and we have to go on these amazing great vacations, and we're pressured to do all of these things. And so we work harder spending more time away trying to earn the money to do all of that. Where with one class I was teaching, this was back when I was in Vegas doing that parenting thing, and I had a dad say, he was raising his son alone and he just didn't have the money for Little League. It wasn't there. And he felt bad. And so we did group think and came up with some ideas. And in the end, he wound up just going out and doing baseball practice, just him and his son, instead of going off somewhere else. And
It's
then
awesome.
what's funny was neighbor kids started coming and saying, "Oh, can I play with you?" Yeah. And so they wound up with this little neighborhood team, and dads came out and was practicing with them. And so within 8 weeks, he went from just starting him and his son to they had a neighborhood. There was a park with just down the road with a baseball field, and mama's made food and they had this big fun baseball game at the end of this 8 weeks. And it didn't cost anybody anything, but what they got from it was those relationships. They got to know their neighbors. They made these connections with people that they didn't know otherwise. And so really, time and quality time, but time. They say quantity over quality, but I don't care if I'm dying of thirst and all you have is 2 ounces of water. It isn't, it could be the best water in the world. It's not going to serve my needs. And so I would say time.
Love it. So, dating age. What is the best, most appropriate dating age in your opinion?
Oh, well, I will go with 16. Because I think before that, it's great for them to have friends. And I think even at 16, I would do group dating where you're all in a group, you're having fun, but you can be a couple, you can have a little boyfriend. And but I just think that below that, and especially, and I think I might even raise it a little bit with all of the social media stuff that's out there and the inappropriateness of it and the inappropriate expectations that are being pushed on to our kids. I mean, it's amazing to me, mom and dad, how we let our daughters leave the house dressed in a way that says, "I'm open for business,"
Yep.
right? I was reading a book, I can't remember, but it was talking about how we dress even our little ones like prostitutes, is what he called them, prostitutes,
Wow.
because even 3 and 4-year-olds are being dressed in ways that are, oh, they look cool. Oh, they look wonderful. Oh, no, this is not the real housewives. And those women are crazy anyway. This
Hmm.
is something where we're protecting our children. We want our daughters to be valued for their brains, for their hearts, for their intellect, for, who they are, not because they're skinny or they have their belly showing or whatever. Because you're a guy, I have sons, I have brothers. You're dressed like that. They're not thinking, "Oh, what an intelligent, lovely woman I would like to get to know." That is not, and we're encouraging men to think that about our daughters. when we let them go out like that. So I would make sure that, I think it's different for every child, boys and girls, but to make sure that they are mature enough to understand the what, the reactions to their decisions, what that can do. Where the crawdads sing. Have you ever seen that movie where the
Hmm.
crawdads sing?
Hmm.
Then there's that scene where
Yep.
she's a villain,
Yep.
right? And he says no. And it's not because he didn't want to, but because he loved her enough to realize that she would have to carry the burden if she got pregnant. And burden would be hers. And he wasn't willing to risk her to that. Those are the boys we want to be raising. We want to be raising the girls that respect themselves and recognize that I have so much more to offer than my body.
And I love that. We have recently, our daughters, my wife is big on this, advocating the fact that your body's changing, and as your body's changing, you need to learn how to respect your body and get into the habit. Not, when you were younger, walking around in your undergarments was cute. That's not cute anymore. And making sure, and it's funny, we just had the conversation with her a couple of days ago, and I agree with you. I think that it accelerates conversations that, quite frankly, are not necessary. Which leads me to the next question: when do you talk to your children about the birds and the bees?
Early, early on. But it's not like, oh, let me sit here and open this fire hydrant of knowledge and information all at once because you turned 12 or 8 or whatever. But this is something that's taught line upon line, precept upon precept, and that we start early, that, you know, babies come from mommy's belly, and we talk about how boys' bodies are different than girls' bodies. And we can start early on with some of those things without going into intimate details and emotional details, but just teaching them some of the early differences. And it's something that's just built on as they grow and become developmentally appropriate.
And it's crazy how we're seeing our children, and I love that you said early, because I agree. It's almost earlier than necessary. And the reason is because if they don't hear from you, they're going to hear from their school friend who saw it in an iPad or heard it from their friend or saw it on their parents' phone. I mean, it's pretty incredible some of the insights that some of our kids' friends have that, to me, just boggles my mind. Some adults don't know what some of the young kids know, which is incredible. Last rapid fire question: what, in your opinion, is the best sport for a young boy and a young girl?
Isn't that fun? The one they love.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And here's why I asked the question: because we tend to push our kids sometimes for them to almost relive our life, right? So if I was this old, frustrated football player, I'm going to push my kid to football, 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 trying to relive my years. Your answer is so perfect. The one that they love and support. There are boys in our dance studio who are amazing. Boys. And there are also girls in our neighborhood that wrestle. And I always say, who cares? The cool thing is that you've taken the opportunity to follow something that you love. Oh my goodness.
I'll tell
Great
you
answer.
something. I have a niece who was the homecoming queen her senior year in high school. She also kicked the winning field goal for her varsity football team at the homecoming game.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So just let them be who they are and move forward with it, and love it, and yeah, just
That's
pay
awesome.
attention to what they love and go with it.
This is a healthcare disruptor, but it's really matriculating to be just a disruptor podcast. And I like to ask all my guests, and for you, how do you feel, DJ, that you are disrupting your industry, your craft? And by disrupting, how are you doing it differently? Because I think we have a lot of crowd thinking. We have a lot of people who are in these echo chambers and they just do the same thing that everybody else is doing, even if it doesn't work. But that's, science. We heard that so much in the last 4 years. COVID, you could walk into a restaurant with your mask on and you sat down, COVID wouldn't get you. But if you sat down in a schoolroom, it would get you, right? That was the science that we
Well,
dealt
we
with.
could have
So,
a huge conversation over that. Huge.
shit,
So,
don't even
but
get me started on
I'll
that.
just
But
give you an example. I was asked this earlier, actually just yesterday. I have purple pens. My pens write in purple ink because I'm crazy. But a pen, this does the same task everyone else does that uses a pen. We're writing, we're making notes, whatever. But the purple makes you look at it differently. Instead of a black or blue, it's purple and it makes you stop and think differently. That's my goal with parenting, is to parent differently, to parent in a way that is true to who you are, to who your kids are, and that we know there's so much research done that we know there are certain things that are tied and true that are going to help our children move forward. And Instagram and Facebook and all of those things are telling us things that are polar opposites to that. And so, my goal and how I am trying to disrupt things is to say, stop listening. Just because it's out there doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's true, but really listen to yourself. Don't take my word for it. Come listen to me. Come and hear what I have to say. And then pay attention to how that works in your family and see if that is true. But don't listen to, excuse me, but the Faucian type experts, if you know what I mean,
hmm
in
I
parenting,
call them the
because there's so
experts.
many of them. Yes, I am the science guy. So, but to really just pay attention to what is right. And for me, and I don't know about y'all, but really being close to God and prayer and being open to what you're being told, that is key in saying, is this right for us? Is this not right for us? But I'm here to tell you that much of what you're being told is wrong and we need to fix it.
I I love what you just said. So we in choosing, so the kids have been going to a Christian school. We are a family of faith, and so are the kids. I grew up in the same environment, and we picked a homeschool educational path that is religious based. And I will tell you, I look back as a teenager and in college, and again, I had a very, very strong mom, a very, very strong dad. Even though they weren't together, they were still very influential in me. But I will tell you, DJ, it wasn't them that steered me away from temptation. It was that inherent, and I should say, almost imposed faith and belief in something that I couldn't see or touch, but I knew that was watching over me. And I remember many, many, many times where I could have gone left and I went, right, because that moral compass that had been really created inside me from religion was so huge. I'm a big believer. I think that is something that we can definitely have a podcast alone on that. And it's something that is also being attacked because, again, it allows people to base decisions on their values, not necessarily on what they're being programmed to do. Last two questions, and we ask this of all of our guests because, again, I think it gives a very genuine response. Number one, what makes DJ happy?
Oh my goodness. Time with my kids, time with my family, and time with God and nature.
Love it. And tell the audience how DJ grew up. This amazing woman with this amazing heart. How did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in a faith home. I grew up with a very educated dad. He was a professor at UCLA of electrochemical engineering.
Wow.
and a mom who was raised by lumberjacks, which is one step up from wolves. And
I love it.
so I had this wide variety of the lumberjack family and the country club hoity-toity family. And so I got to see life from a lot of different angles. And you know, growing up with a big family, I love that I did that. And um yeah, life was good.
I will tell you,
Not easy, but good.
it, but it's crazy how when you see people, and maybe not crazy, it's just intentional, right? When you see people and you meet people that are creating these huge causes out there, which I think for you, the Little Hearts Academy of USA and influencing parents and the future of our society, which is again our children, and you yourself are someone who has a large family. A large family will come from you, and I think as people realize that the most important family to you is not the one you come from, but the one that you create. And I think sometimes people forget that. But I will tell you, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast because from covering a lot of the things that are attacking our youth, I think we cover the most important ones. But I know that there's a tremendous amount of lists that we can probably go on and on and on and discuss. But the thing that I want to highlight to our audience is that one thing that I believe is very apparent, DJ, is that you, at the end of the day, have a tremendous, tremendous heart, and you definitely care. And and listen, it's adamant in the fact that taking on foster children is not easy. Taking on the stresses of others is not easy. I always admire teachers. I admire people in your shoes. Why? Because sometimes the 3 kids that I have are more than enough. And to think and to know that there are people like you in the world who are willing to take on the challenge of others' stresses and others' acrimonies and others' problems, and almost kind of just insulate them and protect them from those challenges and help them throughout these challenges, that is so incredible to me. And it's ironic that Little Hearts Academy is led by someone with the biggest heart around. And again, I really, really appreciate that. And it was a pleasure. I would love to have you more on our podcast. You're in Nevada?
I used to be in Nevada. Then I was in Denver for 14 years, Nevada for 20. And just a year ago, we moved to Little Chester, Idaho, where we have almost 300 people.
That's beautiful. Well, listen, I would love to have you again. This is a great conversation. I think you're doing an amazing, amazing, amazing cause. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our audience?
Just feel free to listen to my podcast. It's Imperfect Heroes, Insights into Parenting. And I also have, if I'm not throwing it around, I have my own children's book, Roman is Bigger. And it's about a little boy who has really big emotions and feelings and how he manages to work through them. So that's it.
Love that. So we're going to put Imperfect Heroes, Insights into Parenting on the link when we air the show, the podcast. We'll also make sure that we send people the link of Roman. Was it Roman and Empire? What's it called?
Roman is Bigger.
Oh, I'm sorry. Roman is Bigger. Beautiful, by DJ Stutz. So we'll make sure we pull that also. And that's on Amazon, I would assume, all those good stuff.
It's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, yeah, all those.
It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, DJ. I wish you lots of luck, lots of enjoyment. You have a fun summer with your, again, I'm sure you have a little one waiting for you to get off this podcast so you can spend time with him.
Yes.
And we are changing the habits of yesterday by creating the new healthcare reality of tomorrow. Thank you so much, DJ. It's been a pleasure.